You gotta give me a second.
Chris, this nigga out.
Hello?
Yeah.
I'm
Chris, are
kind
you
of caught up,
playing?
Mom.
I'm just curious.
Okay. Okay.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
What are you saying?
I was saying based on like I understand the whole numbers. I'm not even talking about like the statistics and numbers and shit. I'm just talking about if you have the film, because a lot of this shit is hindsight 2020, right? So if I'm playing a game, right? I'm playing a game and I don't record it. I'm thinking I remember most of the stuff in that game. In actuality, I really don't. If you really sit down and watch the film, you're like, oh shit, that did happen. You know what I'm saying? Like you forget certain shit if you don't see it again. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So if you have that in your back pocket, if somebody has that in their back pocket, you can't really like for me, for example, I have that in my back pocket because I've seen what you guys have done more than you've seen it. Does that make sense?
From your perspective, yes.
So it doesn't make sense in your perspective? Because I'm asking you if it makes sense to you.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
So does it make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay. So if that's the case, how can you come to me and say my perspective is skewed or that, you know, you think you've made significant progress and what I'm saying basically isn't true?
I mean,
If you're saying at the
primarily,
same time, I can't
realistically
come.
speaking, a lot of
Hmm.
our analysis is anecdotal and
But
subjective to our own biases.
who's closer to accuracy?
It's still to a degree. There's a level of, and it's like it's
Of
still
course there is, but
anecdotal.
who's closer to accuracy?
Rationally speaking, probably the person that has more video to look at and observe.
So if that person is telling you, like, yo, like, the amount of progress you've made, there's progress, but it's not significant from the time you started playing the game. Can you really argue with that person?
I mean, you can, but I still wouldn't listen to somebody like that.
Listen to somebody like what?
That would make such an assertion.
Based off the evidence that they have?
Absolutely, because you still have to like interpret it, and that's still
Who
subject to
has to
bias.
interpret it?
The viewer, because
The person who's viewing the evidence.
where you might see lack of progress, I can view the same video and say, okay, this is what I
But
believe
you're
is
not viewing the video.
important.
That's the thing. You see what I'm
But no,
saying?
but my point is that just because you have video evidence doesn't mean the conclusion that you might reach or the perspective that you shape off that is accurate. I
No,
mean,
it's closer to accuracy. That's why I kept saying that. That's why I kept saying that. It's closer to being accurate. Like, how can you go against something
yeah,
that's
it's
closer to accuracy than what your accuracy is? You see what I'm saying?
because it's still biased.
Yeah, they're both biased, but one is more accurate than the other. Why would you not go for the most accurate
Yeah, but
thing that you
you
have?
say this as if like the person that you're having a conversation with isn't the person that's being critiqued. Like
You said what?
you say this as if the person you're having a conversation with doesn't know like they're being watched. Like I am like the thing that or the individual is the one being critiqued or
Hmm.
looked at in terms of
Yeah,
play style.
right.
And if you're conscious and aware of what you do, which I think me, Chris, and all of us are capable of doing, and we do,
It's only
you
some.
can
Okay,
you
keep
can
going.
measure your progress.
Yes, I feel what you're saying, but I feel like that's coming from someone who doesn't watch film, doesn't see the benefits of it. I'm not saying you have to watch film. I'm just saying you can't really combat somebody who does at that point. You know what I'm saying? Because what I'm saying is like, yeah, you are conscious of what you're doing, but like I said before, there's only so much you can remember about your gameplay. You know what I'm saying? In multiple, like not just 3 or 4 games, like multiple entries of games, like multiple. You know what I'm saying? Like at certain
Mhm.
times, you pick up patterns, tendencies of certain players. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like there's only so much you can remember from every game. You know what I'm saying? Like I can tell you what you did in the games where we played what was it? Where we played that strikeout game in my court. I can tell you what you did right now, but you probably don't remember stuff from that game. That's just one example. You know what I'm saying? So just imagine how much else you've forgotten from previous games. E and Chris, am I making sense?
No, but I was on the phone with her towards the end.
Chris, can you hear me?
Oh
What's that
shit,
background?
Thanks, Chris.
girl again.
So nobody understands what I'm saying.
No, I only heard this at the end. If you just tell me what happened in the beginning, in the sense, because I wasn't
You say
listening.
you tuned out at the end. So did you hear the end or the
No, I
beginning?
didn't. I just heard the end when you just said whether we whether he remembers or not. Like he doesn't remember every details. Like
I'll be able to keep telling what I said.
It's probably better that you say it since it's your point.
Do you understand
'Cause
it
I'm
though?
still trying to, roughly, but you still, there's more to that you have to say because I'm trying to see how all this relates.
Okay. So where's Chris? Because I'm not trying to repeat this
Right
again.
here.
So did you hear me the whole time?
No, I've been taking a shower, but I just got back on.
Oh man.
I've heard the part that I left off was where basically you and Scott was saying, well, it's subjective if someone has film, and you're saying it's just that the person who has film is more accurate than the person who doesn't.
E, did you hear that?
yeah, I heard that part. That's where I got off.
Okay. So when I was saying that part, I'm saying how can you really argue with somebody who has that eye test, memory test, and that film test? You know what I'm saying? How can you combat somebody when you only have the eye and memory test? You know what I'm
Because
saying?
there's
So
still,
hold on, let me
there's still a
you
margin
said
of
I need
error.
to explain my point because I'm not trying to say this over again. So before you cut me off, let me finish. All right. So how can you combat somebody like that? And I feel like you really can't because even if there's bias or it's anecdotal or you know, both cases are are biased or anecdotal. One is more accurate than the other, and the one with the video evidence alongside with the memory and eye test is more accurate. So why wouldn't you take the one that's more accurate and work off of that? You know what I'm saying? Like, why would you go ahead with the one that's less accurate and work off of?
Because it's
That's
not like,
one. Two,
all right, you
I think when you don't when you I'm not saying you have to watch film, but if somebody who actually watches film is telling you all this stuff, you should probably listen and take and heed the advice. Two, right? Three, the reason why you should is because is everybody still listening?
Yeah.
Abiati, E, Chris.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Three, the reason why you should is because when you're playing games, right, and you don't record them, or like you think you remember everything, but you really don't. There's certain things that you see, and you're like, oh shit, like I didn't remember I did that. You know what I'm saying? Or oh shit, I didn't remember he did that. Like I can tell you guys what you guys did in the last 2v2 games we played, or the last strikeout games that we played on my court, or the last pro games that we played. Like just like imagine how many things you've forgotten in those games, and how much progress you could be making if you knew what you were, if you if you knew what you were doing, if you knew your patterns. So how can you argue against that? Like successfully. Go ahead, Abiata.
the reason why you can argue against someone like that successfully is because there's still that margin of error. There's still bias of analysis and things like that. So let's take FIFA, for example. The way E plays, for example, is just abhorrent to me. I hate it. So if I were to watch film about how he plays, I'd be able to pinpoint mistakes everywhere. But like me and E play 1v1, right? And he can beat me. So there's something about what he does that does work. And he needs to
Mm-hmm.
improve that in his own right. So
Mm-hmm.
from my bias and my perspective, I can watch film on E all day and be like, yo, this nigga's fucking nuts and he's crazy. This shit doesn't make sense. And I'm sure he probably has a similar perspective to how I play. Right.
Okay.
So from
So
that, with that example, it's easy to illustrate how just because I have film doesn't necessarily mean I'm always going to be right, or even more accurately right. That's more of a probability, but that doesn't mean it's 100% because it's not 100%. Your question of how can somebody argue against that? That's literally how, because there's still
so
like that
you feel
level of
like
error with
okay.
analysis.
So I have two things. So you feel like it has to be 100% in order for it to be, in order for you to take the advice.
No. I'm literally just responding to your question. When
Okay.
you asked how can somebody argue against that, I'm saying that's how. Whether they should or there's merit, I think, which is what you're stepping into, that's a little bit different of a conversation.
Okay. So I'll ask that one next. But before that, I think the example you used about FIFA didn't really apply if I'm understanding it right because you're saying when you play 1v1 versus how he plays, were you talking about in pro clubs?
No, just in general, like his style, like things that he does from like an IQ perspective that I might
Right,
find
right.
off
But
or
are
wrong.
you talking about 11v11 or pro clubs? Because there's a big difference between those game modes.
in general because how
Mm-mm.
somebody plays as a team in many ways mirrors how they play as an individual. And like
So
just how you said when you were watching us playing like all those 1v1s, you're like, okay, oh, this makes sense. This is why someone does this. This is why somebody does that. Because there's a bigger picture. When you play 11v11 and you control everybody, you see the bigger picture. But in pro clubs, you're just one little piece. So you're still working in the same
But it's
cognitive way.
technically different. It's technically like the
It's not
technicalities
completely
of.
different because the way he plays, if you
I
were
think
to put that
I
as a
think
mastermind
it's
behind a team, that makes
I,
sense.
I think it's not
We
completely
both as
different,
well
but
in the same
it's
system.
different enough. So I think like if me and E play, right? Y'all know me and E play like in ways that are kind of like cartoonish
Goofy.
sometimes, right? So
Yes.
if me and E play together, we can do that. But you can't compare the severity of the mistakes that we might make in that sense to if we're playing with y'all four, because y'all are different. So we got to kind of mold to that. So I see what I was saying. Like you can't necessarily compare like you playing on pro club's
Right.
team versus like when you play 1v1 or when you play something, because your mistakes are tied to specific types of other people. But
Right.
if I can just jump in real quick, the argument before, I
Hmm.
agree, Scott. Like I think film is subjective, right? Like there have been plenty of times that I've watched a recording where y'all have said something and I'm like, I could see something happening different that way. But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, I think the point is that you still can't combat it if you haven't seen it yet. I think that's it.
Hmm.
Like if somebody says, "Yo, I noticed something in film," unless you take the step to watch the film, then
Hmm.
at that point y'all can disagree, y'all can move toward understanding.
Right.
But until then, I don't think you can combat it. And
I
like I
agree.
was saying, I fully admit, I don't think I've watched one aspect of film for this year. And I'm not saying that I've been playing perfect. That could have hurt me in some ways, but I haven't watched the film, so I can't combat it.
Are we out there?
Issue.
Hello.
Hello? Hello?
Yes. Hello.
My thing is, even
Did you hear
though
what?
like
Did you hear what Chris said before you started?
yeah, I heard everything he said. That's I disagree with him. Partially because even though you don't watch film, you're still the experiencer, and that
Yeah.
holds for something.
Oh
I'm
my
not saying it
God.
doesn't hold for anything.
Jesus
So
Christ.
what I'm saying is your point is valid, right? Your point is valid in the sense that film is subjective. I just gave examples of how there have been times I've watched film and I've seen something completely different from what y'all were seeing, right? The the conversation we're having is a level above
It
that
should
right
be.
now.
Hmm.
The conversation we're having is a level above that. We can all acknowledge that. But it's when you take it a step further and you haven't seen the film and you're trying to combat something. So that's like me saying, yo, I don't understand why in the Joker XYZ happened. And then somebody who hasn't seen it yet is like, no, that's not what happened because, oh, well, I haven't seen it, so I don't know.
Damn.
Oh, good cut, good cut. Yeah, but I think that that's a bad analogy in the sense that it's one thing if I don't know. I think a more appropriate analogy is if both people or both participants saw it, but one saw it twice,
Okay.
rather
Sure.
than somebody that just saw it and
Okay.
didn't see
Yeah,
it.
that's fair.
Sure. Okay.
And I think from that perspective, and this is all back to O's first question, which is how can somebody, combat that? It's because you still experienced it. And that's all I'm saying.
Okay. So should you?
You said, should you? So that's the
Hmm.
next conversation.
Yeah. Let's do it.
It depends. So in this case, if you're trying, if you say that you're not, but in the scenario where you're trying to make the case that nobody's made, I just think it's sorry, where
We
nobody's
shouldn't even
made
be
or
talk. We shouldn't even be talking about that because that's not the topic. Let's be efficient in what we're talking about. What I'm saying is that you haven't made as much progress as you think you have, or significant progress in your gameplay. Right? That's what I'm saying. Okay. I'm not saying you haven't made any. So that's people throw that on my mouth all the time, and I'm like, bro, stop going to the extreme. I just don't feel like you've made enough progress. I just doesn't mean I don't think you haven't made any progress. You know what I'm saying? Like people don't really hear when I give compliments, and I've gotten over that. It's just like whatever at that point. But that's kind of tied to this. So you're assuming I'm saying you're not even made any progress, and that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying you haven't made enough progress or a significant amount of progress. If it's not significant, it's not enough. That's how I feel. So what I'm saying is that's how, like, should you combat that based on my eye test, based on my memory test, and based on my film versus just your memory test and her eye test.
I
And
think you
also,
still.
also,
I think
also
you
adding
still.
to the fact that you don't understand basketball as well as I do. But go ahead.
I think that you should. If the merit is, why do you guys play rec, or why should we play this, or why should we play that? Like, I think there's progress to be made, of course, but to the extent that like we just can't operate as like a team or play in these meta scale game forms or whatever the case may be. I think that's where I just have to fall off because just because we're not there yet doesn't mean by playing in these venues and practicing at the
That's
new
not what I'm
ways.
saying either. That's not what I'm saying either. Do you want me to, you want to know what I'm saying?
What are you saying?
This goes back to me saying you don't know everything you need to work on. That's the issue. So when you're playing these games, it's like half
God
um
damn.
it's like half haphazard. You know what I'm saying? Like, because you don't know everything you need to work on.
Scott, I'm about to
And that
go.
goes back to the point of you saying that. Well, I meant that goes back to the point of you saying, oh well, I mentioned everything that you said. That you said I need to work on. That's not all of it though. You see
Yeah,
what I'm
but
saying
that
now?
was in context to like a series of questions that you had asked us about, like
I'll be at it
playing rec.
regardless. What I'm saying is,
Yeah, I'm giving you the ball.
if you don't know everything you need to work on, you know what I'm saying? And somebody's telling you like, yo, you're not ready. Like, you're not even ready to like really dive into it yet.
Scott, let's quit.
You know what I'm saying? Like, can you really? Should you combat that based on what they know?
You hear?
Me, I would.
Should you combat that?
Should you? I think so. Because
E, what about you?
clearly playing
Go
rec,
ahead.
we're
My
getting
bad. Go
better.
ahead, baby. Yeah, go ahead. Mhm.
Playing rec, we're getting better, and that's just a fact. So I think from that standpoint, there's still something worth playing and fighting for.
E, what about you based on what I just said?
I
That was the
I
goofiest
understand.
fucking.
I understand what you're saying. Overall, you have your opinion of how far
How this
progress we
bitch?
made, and playing the rec and your idea is not the ultimate way of really progressing on with the weaknesses that you mentioned. And even though we could say we made a significant progress in our eyes, doesn't mean it always applies because you have your own judgment and based off your IQ of playing ball and the game, you have a better understanding than maybe compared to Scott, in a sense. So you have your point too. You just I mean, to each his own, but it's what the person prefers to play and get better through, pretty much.
Okay. Chris, what about you?
Um, are you asking me like my
Scott, let's quit.
opinion
Scott,
on
please.
what y'all are
These niggas
saying, or
are
just in
annoying
general?
Hmm.
me.
Both, I guess.
I think so. It's
Oh,
for my opinion of what y'all are saying. I think it's a simple point we can get to if everyone can just admit that you can benefit if you watch film. If you don't watch film, you could be missing out on something. Now, if you take it upon yourself to say, I understand that, but even so, fuck it, that's one thing.